questions, but the thing that I'm afraid of that they'll bounce on, which even Bunny I think grabs hold of, is the whole war issue and the safety issue and things like that. And I haven't heard you speak about that where you stand, but I believe that's where they would try to attack you to bring in their known, followers.
First of all, you have to be important enough to be attacked. So it would take a little while.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be great.
When you are attacked, that's good.
That's great.
But I would say that the way I present my message on foreign policy will probably be a little bit different than my father's. We would agree on most things, but I'll give you an example of how I would present my ideas on foreign policy. I do believe that government should work under enumerated powers, but one of the enumerated powers is defense. So I do believe that the defense of our country may well be the primary enumerated power. But does that mean I believe in a blank check for the military? No. Does that mean I believe that the foreign policy we have to have troops in 130 countries or bases and 750 military bases? No. But I do believe that the primary objective and the primary thing that our government should be doing is national defense. If I had my druthers and I were in charge of the budget might well be 80% national defense, but the number would still be much smaller than what we currently spend in the military. So as far as where we target money, yes, I do believe that's what the federal government should do. For example, if we look at the response after 9/11, I think there are things that the president can do unilaterally. For example, since the nuclear age began, we have all acknowledged that the president has the ability to repulse a nuclear attack without immediate congressional authority. The same way, when we were attacked on 9/11, I probably would allow the president to make an initial immediate response without congressional authority. So for example, there's a guy from the CIA who's written a book called Imperial Hubris, Michael Shore, and he says our biggest mistake in going into Afghanistan was that we waited a month and a half and tried to develop a coalition. If we would have sent 5,000 special troops in there, we might have rounded them up in a month. The difference also happens I wouldn't have stayed for 15 years or 10 years or however long we're going to stay. But I think that people who do attack us should be punished and should be repulsed. So I might present that message a little bit differently than my father did, but at the same time, once we went into Afghanistan immediately, when it did take a month to send all the troops and weapons and tanks and all that went in, I do believe in a formal declaration of war. And I would have, if I were in the Senate, one senator could hold the entire debate up, and I would have held the entire debate up and had them formally declare war. But I probably would have voted for war with Afghanistan, but I would have voted against war with Iraq. So I think the message can be presented that you can believe in a military. I do believe in a military response. I'm not for appeasement. And that was sometimes the way Ron Paul people were painted, as not believing in any military or anything. But the good thing about the Ron Paul movement, though, is it got a lot of people who came to the movement who hated the Iraq War and thought it was a mistake, but they came to the movement and also discovered that the ideas of liberty apply to your economic life, your personal life, and that there's a continuum. And I think what young people loved was the consistency, that they believed in liberty in your personal life, what you do in your house, your economic life with your business, and with your foreign policy, that it should all promote liberty. And, the whole idea of blowback and unintended consequences was important. That's what made my father famous, I think, was his response to Giuliani. But, he was booed by the Republican audience when he made that response. Right. But it opened a lot of minds and introduced a lot of people that, who is this guy that would stand up and say the unthinkable, that maybe some of the bad things that happen are a reaction to our presence in some of these countries with military troops. But I think that message can be presented and be something that Republicans can agree to. And even a lot of Republicans did and still do maybe have some misgivings about the Iraq War, but they don't want someone who will lead their party who doesn't believe in any military response. And I think I would have to assure people that I do believe that the military is something that, look at the people who I think are my friends and supporters. Chris Derry went to the Air Force Academy. My dad was in the Air Force. My nephew's a pilot in the Navy who joined right after 9/11. We're not people who just believe that the world should run over us, but at the same time, that doesn't mean we give the military a blank check. And I think the great inconsistency in the Republican Party is that they'll stand up and say, that welfare queen, if we could just cut that welfare queen off, we'll balance the budget. But we don't care what we spend on the military budget. that is the great irony of the Republican Party and why they're not believable. And it's why if I could get through a Republican primary, I could get to a general election, I think I can be believable, because I'm going to say there's huge amounts of waste in the military. We do have to change our foreign policy to be less expansive and more of a protection of our country. And I think people can accept that, particularly the independents can accept that. You have to get through the Republican primary, and there are some doubters there. But when you get to that, 40% of our state's Republican, 40% is Democrat, and 20% is independent. And those are the ones you have to sway once you get to a general election. Anybody else?